Good morning, Virgo. Welcome to your weekly tarot reading. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you are doing really well. Okay, Virgo, you've been grinding, not casually, not half-heartedly, but genuinely putting in work, showing up even when you didn't feel like it, maintaining consistency even when results weren't immediately visible, doing the thing repeatedly while others quit or never started, and it's been frustrating, hasn't it? Watching people who seem to put in less effort get more results, seeing others hit milestones you're still working toward, wondering if what you're building will ever actually pay off or if you're just wasting time on something that's never going to work. You've questioned yourself, questioned your approach, questioned whether you're delusional for keeping at something that hasn't produced the outcomes you were hoping for by now, but you kept going anyway. Maybe not every single day, maybe not perfectly, but enough, consistently enough that there's actually been accumulation, building, momentum, gathering, even when you couldn't see it. How long have you actually been at this thing you're working on? Count the months or years, honestly. Because here's what might actually be true. And notice I keep saying might, could, potentially, not will or guaranteed. You could be approaching an inflection point, a threshold where the compounding you've been creating starts becoming visible, where the foundation you've been laying actually starts supporting a structure people can see, not because the universe decided it's finally your turn, not because you manifested hard enough, not because some cosmic lottery picked your number, but because that's how compounding works. You do something repeatedly over extended period. It produces small incremental gains that don't feel significant in isolation, but those small gains build on each other, and at some point unpredictable exactly when the accumulation reaches critical mass, and suddenly things that were impossibly hard become surprisingly easy. That's not jackpot, that's not luck. That's compound interest on effort, that's skill development, reaching proficiency threshold. That's network effects kicking in after you've been showing up in spaces long enough for people to remember you. Have you been seeing any early indicators that momentum is building? Name them if they're there, even if they feel small. Because let me tell you what winning actually looks like in real life. It's not one dramatic moment. It's not lottery ticket. It's not sudden transformation where everything changes overnight. It's gradual shift where things that used to require enormous effort start requiring less, where opportunities that used to be out of reach start becoming accessible, where results that used to feel impossible start feeling achievable. It's getting the client you've been hoping for, not because they found you randomly, but because you've been visible in the right spaces long enough that when they needed someone, you were who they thought of. It's having the opportunity show up not because you got lucky, but because you positioned yourself where opportunity circulates and stayed there long enough to be in the right place when timing aligned. It's experiencing the breakthrough not because you deserved it through suffering, but because you developed competence through practice, and that competence finally reached level where it produces tangible value that people will pay for. That's what winning looks like. Not magic, just compounding finally becoming visible. Does that version of jackpot feel more realistic than what you were hoping for? Adjust your expectations if needed, because I need to address the you've been waiting framing. Waiting implies passivity. It implies sitting around hoping something happens to you. It implies expecting external forces to deliver outcomes you've done nothing to create. And I don't think that's what you've been doing. I think you've been working, trying, building, showing up, taking action, even when you weren't sure it would lead anywhere. That's not waiting. That's preparing. That's positioning. That's creating conditions. And there's massive difference between those two approaches. Waiting means you're at the mercy of external circumstances, means you're powerless until something or someone grants you what you want. Preparing means you're actively creating the circumstances, means you're building the skills and relationships and visibility that make good outcomes more probable. So stop thinking of yourself as someone who's been waiting. Start thinking of yourself as someone who's been preparing, who's been getting ready, who's been doing the work that positions you to receive when opportunity presents itself. Which mindset have you actually been operating from? Be honest about whether you've been active or passive, because here's what you need to understand about momentum. When it finally kicks in, when compounding finally becomes visible, when the threshold gets crossed, it can feel sudden. It can feel like overnight success. It can feel like jackpot, even though it's actually just the logical outcome of sustained effort. And when that happens, when things start flowing in ways they haven't before, when opportunities start appearing with frequency that feels unprecedented, you're going to be tempted to attribute it to luck, to timing, to finally getting your turn, to the universe rewarding you. But that attribution, while it might feel good, it's disempowering, because if you think it's luck, you won't understand how to sustain it. If you think it's external forces, you won't recognize your own agency in creating it. So when good things start happening, if they start happening, attribute them correctly. Not to magic, not to cosmic intervention, but to your own sustained effort meeting aligned circumstances, because that attribution matters. It determines whether you can replicate success or whether you just got lucky once and don't know how to do it again. Can you commit to owning your wins when they come? Tell me you'll actually claim credit for what you've built, because I also want to talk about what happens when you do experience success. Some people can't handle it. They get the thing they've been working toward and they immediately sabotage it. They reach the level they've been aiming for and they do things that knock themselves back down. Why? Multiple reasons. Imposter syndrome. They don't believe they deserve it. Don't believe they're actually good enough to be at that level. So they unconsciously create circumstances that confirm their belief that they don't belong. Comfort with struggle. They've built identity around being someone who's trying, working, grinding. When they actually achieve, when the struggle ends, they don't know who they are anymore. So they recreate struggle to restore familiar identity. Fear of visibility. Success often means being seen, being known, being subject to judgment and criticism. And for people who've stayed small to stay safe, that visibility feels threatening. So they shrink back to avoid exposure. Guilt about having while others don't. They achieve and immediately feel bad about it, feel like they're abandoning people who are still struggling, feel selfish for celebrating when others are suffering. And all of those patterns, they destroy the very success people worked so hard to create. So if momentum does build, if success does start manifesting, if the jackpot in realistic terms does arrive, you need to be ready to actually receive it, to let yourself have it, to not immediately sabotage what you've created. Which of those patterns do you recognize as potential threat? Identify them now so you can address them before they activate. Because here's something else worth examining. What do you actually want? What would winning the jackpot actually mean for you in concrete terms? Because if you're chasing some vague idea of success, if you're working toward outcomes you haven't clearly defined, if you're hoping for something good without specificity about what that means, you might achieve and not even recognize it. You might get what you were actually working toward, but dismiss it because it doesn't match the fantasy version you were imagining. So get specific. What would constitute genuine win for you? What would make the effort feel worth it? What would create the feeling of, yes, this is what I was working toward? And be realistic. Not about limiting what's possible, but about defining success in terms that are actually achievable rather than fantasy standards that no reality could meet. What does your version of jackpot actually look like? Define it clearly enough that you'll recognize it if it shows up, because I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Even if everything I'm sensing is accurate, even if you are approaching inflection point, even if momentum is building toward visible breakthrough, it still might not feel like enough. It still might not solve all your problems. It still might not create the permanent ease you've been imagining success would bring, because success in one area doesn't automatically fix other areas. Professional wins don't heal relational wounds. Financial improvement doesn't resolve internal struggles. External achievement doesn't create internal peace. So if good things do start happening, if the compounding does become visible, if you do experience wins you've been working toward, let yourself celebrate them. Let yourself feel satisfied. Let yourself acknowledge that effort paid off and something real was achieved. But don't expect those wins to transform your entire life. Don't expect external success to solve internal issues. Don't expect achievement to create fulfillment if fulfillment isn't also being built from the inside. Can you celebrate wins without needing them to fix everything? Practice that capacity now. Because here's what I really want you to understand. Whether or not you win the jackpot in any dramatic sense, whether or not you experience breakthrough that feels like turning point, whether or not the momentum you've been building becomes visibly obvious, the work you've been doing matters, the consistency you've maintained has value, the skills you've developed through practice are real assets regardless of immediate outcomes. And that work, that consistency, that skill development, it's already changed you. It's already made you more capable. It's already positioned you differently than you were before you started. So even if the external wins take longer to manifest than you're hoping, even if the jackpot moment never comes in the form you're imagining, you haven't wasted time. You haven't been deluded. You've been building something real. And building takes time. Compounding takes time. Becoming genuinely good at something takes time. So keep building, keep compounding, keep developing. Not because jackpot is guaranteed, but because the building itself has value, whether or not it produces dramatic external validation. Does that shift your relationship to the work you're doing? Consider whether you can find value in process independent of outcome. Because ultimately, here's what this comes down to. You might be approaching a period where sustained effort starts producing disproportionate results, where things get easier, where wins come more frequently, where the grinding gives way to something that feels more like flow. Or you might not be there yet, might still have more foundation to lay, might still be in the building phase where results aren't proportional to effort. I can't promise which is true. I can only tell you what energy suggests is possible. But what I can tell you definitively is this: if you stop now, if you quit before compounding has chance to work, if you abandon what you've been building because results aren't arriving on your preferred timeline, you guarantee that all the work you've done doesn't pay off. You ensure that the foundation you've laid never gets to support a structure. But if you keep going, if you maintain consistency even when you're tired, if you stay in action even when you're uncertain, you give compounding chance to work, you allow momentum to build, you create conditions where wins become increasingly probable. No guarantees, no promises, just probability that favors people who stay in the game long enough for accumulated effort to produce visible outcome. So what are you going to do? Keep building or quit right before it might pay off? Choose. Then commit fully to whichever you choose. Because jackpots, real ones, not fantasy ones, they come to people who show up consistently over extended time. You've been showing up, keep showing up. That's the whole game. Build until the foundation holds, then build higher. That's how you win.